I'm homesick. Been homesick a few days, so I was plugging some numbers. I was looking at Kruleboyz damage comparison. Let's have a look together. But first, of course, I'd like to thank all my patrons, Wybarian for the art, and Baron of Dice for supporting the channel. Use code MDG at checkout. Cool. So here we are. So here's all that I did. I plugged in the different profiles from these different units into a damage calculator. I just used this one, AOS stats hammer.herokuapp.com. Herokuapp.com. Yep, just plugged it in. I was careful about everything, and I came up with some numbers. From taking these numbers based on the saves, I did some math, had some formulas where I just calculated the average, like how much damage they were doing per point. And from there, I got averages. So Gobsprak, I don't know why it says 5 here. Gobsprak against a 4-up save is going to do 2.15 damage on average and a little bit more against a wizard. So it means that the average damage per point that Gobsprak is going to be doing against all these different saves is 2.154. So very low. If we're looking at units that are going to be dealing high damage, we're going to be looking at about 5. So let's just take a quick look through. So the Vulture Boss is going to deal just under 3 damage on average per point, right? So it's about 3 damage per 100 points, I think. I don't think it's per point. I think it's per 100 points. Yeah, because 290 points times 3 is a lot of damage. So I think it's like per 100 point. Yeah, so Gobsprak's damage is overall pretty low, but we all knew that. Even against wizards, having that additional rend is not super helpful against wizards. So his damage is pretty low. The Vulture Boss's damage is a little bit higher, still not super high. With Prized Beast, however, the damage can go up quite a bit. Like we're seeing against a 4-up save that with Prized Beast, the damage is going up by a couple. And this, of course, is going to be even more once he is battle damaged, right? Because we don't have to suffer any battle damage with this, with Prized Beast. So with Prized Beast, the damage is going to go up to like 3.7 damage per 100 point, which is still not very high, but higher than a lot of other things in our army. We're looking at a Sludge Raker. The Sludge Raker deals more damage by itself than a Vulture Boss. And with Prized Beast, it's going up to 4.5. So Prized Beast on a Sludge Raker is actually pretty good. It helps the unit deal a little bit more damage. And he is, of course, a little bit more Tar Pity than the Vulture Boss. Swamp Boss Scumdrek deals less damage per 100 points than a Sludge Raker and doesn't have the option of taking Prized Beast because he is unique. So our damage here with Scumdrek is weaker than it is with Sludge Raker. He's also, but we'll talk about him in a little bit here. So Breaka Boss. Breaka Boss might be our most damaging hero by a lot. When I did his math, I assumed that he was going to get 4 extra attacks on his big clubs, which is if you roll a 2 as opposed to a 1 or a 3. So I took the middle ground to calculate his damage. So this damage can actually go up a little bit higher if you do roll 3 mortal wounds on him when you're yanking on the Breaka harness. And Prized Beast is pretty good for him. He doesn't. I'm not sure if he does degrade, but just getting +1 to hit on. There's no battle damage for the Breaka Boss, but just being able to take those clubs from a 4 to hit to a 3 to hit is significant, right? Like it's pretty helpful. So if you're looking for a hero that's going to slap in melee, Breaka Boss is definitely the best one that we have, right? Like we're looking at about a 5.1, and there's nothing else that even breaks a 4. You know, we're at 3.6, 3.6, and then 5.1. Even the Gnash Tooth, like the Gnash Tooth going cheaper in points, it's still not very damagey. I really like this that I did here because if a Gnash Tooth was 100 points, it would be better than a Breaka Boss. But even at 120 points, the Gnash Tooth is not pulling its weight just in terms of damage. He's, you know, obviously faster, but not very high damage for an Ashtooth. Kragnos has very low damage for his point cost. His raw damage, you can see, like if we look at a Breaka Boss against a 4-up save, we're dealing about 11.5 damage. For Kragnos, we're dealing about 21 damage. So we're doubling the damage output of the Breaka Boss here, but we're more than doubling its points. So Kragnos actually scores really low in damage per 100 points. This is why I say that Kragnos needs to be being brought into combat like on turn 3 or turn 4, because he's not going to be your like charge into a full reinforced buffed unit with all out defense. He's going to be better when your opponent has lost, you know, like a lot of their models, and what he's really doing is he's going into the battlefield to clean up, right, to sort of wipe out units that are like a unit of Ardboys with all out defense. You're only going to kill 5 of those Ardboys, right? So if there's only 5 Ardboys left, then that's where Kragnos wants to be. He wants to be sort of going in and cleaning up the party. That's his role, because his damage is high, but not per 100 points. So he's not really a hammer investment in your army. Kragnos is more of a support hero in your army that is able to clean up the battlefield at the end. So you want him to stay alive. Gutrippaz are 3.9, so they are higher than a lot of these other units. It's like these hero units, right? Because 3.89, like our Sludge Raker, like our Breaka Boss is obviously going to be higher, but our best Sludge Raker is 3.62, so Gutrippaz are 3.89, so they're a little bit higher without any buffs on their own. And then with Venom Encrusted Weapons, which is a buff that we have a hard time landing, they're going to go up. So 5.4. So Gutrippaz with Venom Encrusted Weapons is a lot of damage, and this is sort of why I think that they wanted to nerf the Sludge Raker, because as soon as this was 2 damage, it was a lot, right? It was a lot. So, but they are a glass cannon, so it is what it is. But Gutrippaz, I think Gutrippaz being compared to Monster-killas is the way to compare it, right? So a unit of Gutrippaz at 150 points for 10 is 3.89 damage per 100 points, but Monster-killas is 5.5 damage per 100 points. It's a lot. Monster-killas deal a lot more damage per point. The trade-off that you're getting with Monster-killas is their survivability. A unit of Gutrippaz has 20 wounds, but Monster-killas only have 14 wounds, and they don't have any kind of like minus to hit like the Gutrippaz do, right? On a 3-up, their scare tactics make them -1 to hit against them. So Monster-killas are trading damage for survivability. In an army with Strike Last, that's why I almost never run Gutrippaz with the intention of them dealing damage anymore. When I run a reinforced unit of Gutrippaz, it's because I want to throw a Swampcalla Shaman on them, I want to throw Mork's Cunning on them, and I want to all-out defense them. I want to have them be on 4-ups, ignoring 2-rend with a -1 to hit. That's what I want to do. I want to attempt to have them be a tar pit. If I'm looking for a unit that I just want to deal damage, or if I want to just have, you know, damage that I can trade with my opponent, either with Strike Last or whatever, then Monster-killas are going to be the way to go. Because, again, they just outperform. Like, even with Venom Encrusted Weapons, right? Like, 5.5 damage from Gutrippaz, and then 7.13 damage from Monster-killas. And then when we throw in against monsters, the damage just goes up from there, right? Monster-killas are going to deal about 6 damage per 100 points against monsters, which is very, very, very high. Anything that's 5 or above is really high. So for 120 points, you're going to get 6 damage per 100 points, while a Breaka Boss is only going to be about 5.1 damage per 100 point. So, like, that's a pretty significant difference, right? Like, it's a pretty large increase, 5.1 to about 6 versus monsters. It's very, very strong. Monster-killas are one of our most damaging unit in the game. They are just very squishy, right? With a 5-up save, no ward, and no other, like, minus to hit or anything, right? Like, no tricks coming from them. Marshcalla Sloggoth, very low damage per 100 points, 2.5 or 2.4. but that's not his role. His role is to, I don't know what his role is, to give run in charge, right? He's a support. Giving run in charge in this army is good, right? Mobility is good. The Marsh Crawl is good. I think he could probably come down in points a little bit more still, but that's okay. Now, Hobgrots, to me, was very interesting because, so the thing with Hobgrots is that they are on a 6-up save, and they do only have 1 wound each. So for a unit, it's only 10 wounds on a 5-up save. Or is it even a 6-up save? Let me just pull it up real quick. I can't remember. I haven't played. No, they're on a 6. Yeah, they're on a 6-up save. So with no other, so Gutrippaz are 10 models, so 20 wounds on a 5-up save. And so Hobgrot are 10 wounds on a 6-up save. So they're quite a bit squishier, but they actually deal a lot. They actually deal pretty good damage. 4.3. So the thing that really puts them over the edge is that they have shoot in combat, and their shooting combat attack, so they always get to shoot. So if a unit has shoot in combat, I include its shooting attack as part of its melee combat attacks, right? So it's like Hobgrots are going to deal, like they throw 10 dice on 4s and 3s with 1 wound and 1 damage, like it's not terrible. You're going to get some damage through, and then this is before the combat phase, so hopefully you could maybe remove a model or 2 from what you're fighting with their shooting combat, and then their slit of knives are garbage, right? 2 attacks, 4s and 5s, no rend 1 damage. But as soon as you include them with a Scumdrek and they get crit mortals, the damage goes up. Now they're at 7.4 damage per 100 points. So they actually are pretty explosive with their damage. If you also include a Slitaboss, you're up to 8 damage per 100 points. But the problem is that they're never going to be able to deal this damage because they die, right? Like D3 mortal wounds, any kind of shooting attacks, there's nothing that they can really do to help stop them. I mean, Kruleboyz does have access to a once per game 5-up ward, but it's not going to be enough. They're so squishy, but if they do connect with a Scumdrek in particular, they are going to shred. So I think that if you're out there and you're thinking about trying to play like a double Krul or a double Sludge Raker list, I think you could probably make it work. I think that's something that you might be able to do a thing. I don't think it's super likely, but if your opponent is slow and doesn't have any shooting, like if you can set this up, I think you could probably make it work. But it's gonna be tricky. Okay, now to some of our shooting units. So we have Boltboyz. So Boltboyz are interesting because they sort of have 4 different profiles, right? They obviously have aimed and they have hasty, but if you move, you lose +1 to hit. So if you stay still, right? So here we have aimed move and hasty move, and then we have aimed no move and hasty no move. So our most damaging profile is obviously going to be the hasty shot if we have not moved. You can see that the damage is kind of interesting because against really high saves, the difference between aimed and moved is that aimed is going to be slightly, I think it's basically you just take hasty every time. If you are within range of hasty shot, you take hasty shot every single time. Because hasty only has 1 rend compared to the 2 rend of aim shot, the worse the save of your opponent, the greater the distance between hasty and aimed is, right? So you can see at the 2-up save that the difference between hasty and aimed is pretty much the same. We're talking about a 0.01 difference here. So it's always just better. It's always just better to take hasty, right? Just like it was in the previous edition. Hasty is just a better profile. This is why I say with Boltboyz that if you're gonna go heavy into shooting, which might be the way to play them right now, if you go into the sub-faction that extends their range, what you're doing is you're gonna have hasty shot have a 33% range increase going from 12 to 15, and that's a lot of distance. Like going from 12 to 15 is significant. Oh my god, I'm so popular. But if you have that +3 range, you're going to get hasty off more often, which means you're going to be hitting these 8, 9, 10 damage numbers per unit. So if you're shooting into something that has like a 4-up save, and there's 3 reinforced units of Boltboyz, because this is a reinforced unit, by the way, it's 220 points, because that's normally how we take them. If you take them in squads of 3, the damage will go up slightly, because you're going to have 1 more attack from an additional champion in the other squad, right? But, you know, so hasty shot, if you didn't move, is 3.72 damage per 100 points. So it's not as high as some of our other units, right? Like a unit of Hobgrots just deals more damage all by themselves. But this is the 3.72 damage per 100 points for Boltboyz is going to be a little bit more reliable because you're probably not losing as many models in combat, right? Because you're staying out of combat. And it's damage that you can pump out every turn from ranged. So 3.72. And last but not least, we got a Killbow. So again, we have Killbow, move, no move versus monsters, and then no move versus monsters. And 1.46 damage is what you can expect on average if you're shooting at a non-monster unit after having moved. So this is where the Killbow is going to be like kind of trash. It's like, oh, I'm shooting at any unit, right? Any unit that isn't a monster after I moved, your damage is not great. Even if you don't move and you stay still, you're still only expecting about 2 damage. Now the thing with the Killbow is that it's going to be incredibly swingy, right? Like every once in a while, you're going to connect against a monster and deal 12 damage, but it's not reliable because it's D6 damage against non-monsters. What you're really doing is it's really swingy. You know, it's like sometimes it's like 3s to hit, you're going to roll a 1 or a 2, game over. Or you're going to roll a 4 and a 1, and then you're going to miss your wound roll. But sometimes you'll be looking at monsters, and you'll hit them both to wound. Maybe you'll roll double 6s, and they auto wound, right? And all of a sudden you're like 3 rend against your monster, and your opponent's playing like a gore grunt or a gouger, right, with a 4-up save, and they're like, well, I don't get to make a save, and you're like, cool, 12 damage. No ward? Okay, it's dead. And that's why the Killbow is good. The Killbow is not good because of its damage. The Killbow is good because if your opponent is playing a monster, they're terrified. You can just tell them, well, it's 2 attacks, but against monsters, it's 6 damage. So your monster has 12 HP? So if I connect with, and it's 3 rend against your monster. So if I connect it to hit to wound, right, then it's coming through. Like, this is one of those things where if you wanted to really get in your opponent's head at the beginning of the game, that's what I would say. I'd be like, oh yeah, like against your monster, if I don't move, right, and I have a 24-inch range or a 27-inch range if I'm playing that sub-faction, it's like, oh yeah, 3s to hit, right, 2s to wound, 3 rend, and 6 damage. Your opponents can be like, oh geez, and maybe just keep it out. But if you attack like 3 rounds with this thing, you know, like it's gonna be taking out monsters if you can keep it safe in the back. And that's it. So in recap, I think that overall, Boltboyz are going to deal more damage overall than Killbows, unless it's a monster. If it's a monster, I think your Killbow is going to be scary. And the psychological warfare of having a 24-inch Killbow is definitely legit. Hobgrots deal a shocking amount of damage if they don't just die. Right, if they don't just die. But as soon as you start throwing like an impact mortal, or if they don't get to attack first in the activation chain, it's going to be really bad. And you're only going to get 1 attempt with this, right? Like once if Hobgrots strike first, like let's say that the stars align and you have a Slitta boss and Swamp Boss Scumdrek, and you know all of your Hobgrots made it in and they're reinforced against a 4-up save, you'll be dealing something like 15 damage at most, and then the unit's going to basically evaporate. So they're like a one-trick pony. So if you're bringing a Scumdrek, if you're bringing a Slitta boss, if you happen to get these guys into combat at full strength, they're only going to get to do it once. They're going to have no survivability, right? They're just going to melt. Check out my next video. Marshcrawler's not there for damage. Monster-killas are very good for damage. Gutrippaz are mediocre for damage. They need venom encrusted weapons, but that's a buff that we can put on reliably, right? With our tower, with our scare tower, whatever it's called. I guess I got it right here. Scare Gob Totem, right? With our faction terrain, but I don't think that's really what they're for. That's what Monster-killas are for. And then all of our big monsters don't really hit hard at all, except for the Breaka Boss. Breaka Boss is the only one that is really there for damage. So damage in Kruleboyz, right? Boltboyz, Monster-killas, Breaka Boss. I think you have to probably include at least Boltboyz and Monster-killas in every single army. The Breaka Boss, I think, plays the role almost like Kragnos, where he wants to stay and jump in later in the game to really smash stuff up. And if you are looking for a prize beast target, it can be him. And he could also, for the exact same reason, be a field sergeant. Oh no, because it has to be infantry, so he can't be field sergeant. Cool. So let me know what you think. What are you going to play for damage in Kruleboyz? Like, subscribe. Wah.